The Minnesota Wild are in a tough battle for the last playoff spots in the Western Conference. Seth Toupal of Locked On Wild joins us to talk about what it'll take to get in and what their prospects are. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It is always a pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Wild, Seth Toupal. And Seth, it's a dogfight right now for the Minnesota Wild. They've played a few more games than some of the teams they're fighting for, but they are right there in the battle for that final playoff spot. Talk to me about what's been going on. 3-0-1 in their last four.
Yeah, it seems like the team has kind of started to finally understand the gravity of the situation that they find themselves in currently on the outside looking in and trying to catch the Vegas Golden Knights for the final wild card spot in the Western Conference. Ever since the Arizona game a few games ago on the road, it just seems like the battle level has been much better for this team. They played Colorado very tight. Unfortunately, weren't able to win that game, but they had the moment that everybody in the NHL world is talking about when John Hines pulled Marc-Andre Fleury out of the net in overtime. They beat Nashville. They get both points there. Unfortunately, came up short against the St. Louis Blues. They pick up 1 point, but it felt like 2 was definitely there for the taking. And so you look at this situation in the West, Gil, and you are battling with the St. Louis Blues to try to vault the Vegas Golden Knights. And it really feels like that list of teams that are fighting for that spot is really starting to tighten up. Calgary is distantly back. The Seattle Kraken are still kind of in the mix, but it feels like it really is coming down to Minnesota, St. Louis, and Vegas as the legitimate teams that are all vying for that spot. And Vegas has been a little bit of a mess here recently. So the Wild find themselves 3 points back. So it's definitely doable. They play the Golden Knights a couple of times before the season is done. They play St. Louis a couple of times before the season finishes up. So the Wild do have opportunities to get themselves above water, but it just... every day there's going to be position jockeying. They're going to be looking at like, well, if you only had this point. And so this is just life as host of a show of a team that is in a fight to the end for one of those wild card spots.
You mentioned Marc-Andre Fleury recently getting his 75th career shutout. Talk to me about that milestone, what it meant for Fleury and what it meant for the team.
Fleury he's been great over the last 13 games in which he has been in, which includes him coming in relief of Philip Gustafsson against Vancouver. In the 13 games, 12 starts that Fleury has last had, he is 9-2-1. He's got a goals against average of right around 2 and a save percentage of about .920. But I think the thing that has helped, because Fleury's been good. He's been great on this stretch. But I think the Wild have done a really good job of helping limit the shots that get through. They have upped their block numbers over the last few games. That shutout that he had against the Anaheim Ducks, he only faced 16 shots the entire night. And so the Wild are doing a good job defensively of limiting, especially high danger. I think the Ducks had 3 total high danger chances the entire game. And so if you can limit those, if you can get a couple more blocks, that makes life on your goalie very stress-free. And the Wild are they're going with the hot hand here down the stretch. And Philip Gustafsson, the younger of the two, has been inconsistent this year. And it's interesting that some comments that John Hines has made recently saying basically like, look, we're going to go with the guy that gives us the best chance to win. And if you want to be that guy, pick it up.
What do you think is off with Gustafsson this year?
I think it stems from the fact that last year was his first full season in the NHL. And I think teams just got a little bit of film on how to attack him. And it's tough to make adjustments to those types of things while a season is going on. And so it seems like some nights he gets a good handle on it and has some really good performances, but others, when things start to go wrong, you kind of revert back to that old form. And so for him, I think it's something that he's going to have to try to overcome during the rest of the season, obviously. But the biggest chance for him to make big adjustments is going to be in the offseason to try to correct some of the habits that are leading to him consistently getting beat up top. That's something that he's just going to have to put the time in the offseason to try to get himself back on track.
So we're coming down to the last 15 games, give or take, of the regular season. This is going to be a dogfight, probably go down to the very end. What are the keys for the Minnesota Wild if they hope to make the playoffs?
Well, I think one of the big ones is you got to get, number one, you got to get Joel Eriksson back and healthy. He is the engine of the car. As much as Kirill Kaprizov is probably your most important player for the Minnesota Wild, Joel Eriksson is your least replaceable. He is the number one center. He is the net front guy on your number one power play. He is your number one penalty killing forward. He is probably your best defensive forward. And so trying to replace all of those key pieces, as well as he takes about 60% of the faceoffs for the team since John Hines took over. So he just deploys him anytime there's a critical faceoff that needs to be won. So trying to replace all those aspects is impossible. And so if they can get Eriksson back and healthy, that's going to help. And thankfully for the Wilds, they have had the kind of top level production that you need. The problem has been the secondary scoring.
Right.
This team has been carried by Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson, Matt Zuccarello to a lesser extent. Like those top six guys have by and large done the work. It's the third and the fourth lines, and it's something like in the last 30 games since the season flipped to 2024, you've got guys like Marcus Johansson, who has 6 points in 30 games. Freddie Gaudreau has 2 points in 30 games. Like, you got to get those secondary guys, and you're not asking them to be major contributors, but they have to be able to chip in when teams key in on that top line. And so if they can get more even performances from those secondary guys, that's going to help a long way too. And if they can keep getting this from Marc-Andre Fleury and net, they're getting good enough goaltending to win games. Like that has been something that they've struggled with early on in this season. If Fleury can continue to perform at a level at or above where he currently is, they've got the goaltending they need to win. It's just about getting some of that key scoring contributions to match.
Well, we'll see if they can get the job done. I know you'll be covering it every step of the way. Seth, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and how they could follow you on social media?
Absolutely. Just search Locked On Wild on Google or whatever your preferred internet search domain is, and you'll find everything that we have to offer on social media, on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platforms. Just search Locked On Wild, and you'll find everything that we have to offer. And then you can follow me on X at Seth Toups. We'll continue to keep you updated here throughout the rest of the season.
All right, Seth, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether it's betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. And it's not just college basketball. You've got pro basketball. Baseball is in spring training. And, of course, the hockey as well. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and bet college hoops until they cut down the nets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn, FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Check it out today.